Good afternoon, everybody. We're happy to have you here again with us here on ZEISS Conversations. Today, we had a little bit of a change up here. I apologize for those of you who wanted to come and talk to Gene from Sony. He is busy with some things that have to get done on that side of the house. We will have Gene back, most certainly. But as ever, one of our ZEISS ambassadors has agreed to step in and talk about a lot of good photography here that he's been doing and some tips and tricks for you for the post-pandemic photography that you're going to do. We're going to talk about street photography today. So with me today in the studio is Mr. I did it again, Ken. I said I wasn't going to do that. Professor Kenneth Hines is with us all the way from hot Atlanta. It's been warm down there today. And with him to his right and is taking the center square today, is our ZEISS ambassador, Tracy Page. Also from the great state of Georgia. They're going to be talking about how to shoot street photography using different lenses, as a matter of fact. Ken likes to challenge himself in some ways, but I'll let him tell you about that. I, as always, am Tony. I'm the senior marketing manager with ZEISS Camera Lenses here in New York. And we're here to bring all this information to you today, right here and live. So welcome, everybody. Hey, Ken and Tracy, good to have you back.
So it sounded for a moment there like Ken was a substitute subject, but Ken and I actually, with Tony, we'd come up with a list of topics, and this was one we had planned to do. We just moved it up in the queue a little bit.
Right.
But I am so fascinated by Ken's street photography because it is so opposite of what I do. So everything I do is planned or with a client with a particular pattern. What Ken does is completely different. So we thought it would be a lot of fun to kind of have Ken take us through, introduce us to his work, tell us about his perspective, his lens perspectives. We're going to get a chance. I get to interview Ken. So this is going to be fun. So Ken, right, I know, right?
It's going to be very different for me. I'm like, I'm not hosting. It's different.
You were in the hot seat today, Ken.
Yeah.
But you got to ask me questions a couple of weeks ago about my creative workflow. So it's my turn. It's payback is, HEW hockey stick. Hockey stick.
Exactly. So we should have a lot of fun today. And of course, anybody who's watching, please do feel free to add your questions into our chat box. We'll make sure that to grill Ken and ring him of all the information that he's withholding from us.
Yeah, and we do really enjoy the opportunity to grill Ken, so we're going to do that. So Ken, why don't you lead us off a little bit, introduce us to what you're doing.
So yeah, I'm the guy that people pretty much know for doing street photography with an 85mm lens. A lot of people have seen the interview that I did with Jason Vong, where I talked about my whole kind of street process and how I actually got started in using an 85 lens. So for me, how I got started was just 3 years ago. And I saw a lot of photographers that were taking pictures and, being in New York City, it's so much that's around. I started out wide and just taking pictures of architecture and really focusing more on the buildings, not necessarily the people. And it just eventually gravitated to where I'm looking at the people just walking the streets. I'm like, I think I want to photograph that a bit. And when I was looking at lenses, people pretty much went to 35 and 50. Those were the street lenses. But I wanted to do something different outside of that. So I'd never shot really a lot of my work above 50mm. So I wanted to try an 85. And I got the Bodice 85 as my first lens. And I just went to town with it, basically. And for me, the reason I did that was I'm a shy photographer. And I wanted that distance between my subject and myself. And so I really wanted to not be obvious, because as I was learning and getting into it, I really wanted to feel for it first. And the 85 really did that for me. But now I'm shooting a lot wider than what I was a couple years ago. And so it just changes up over time.
So Ken, you mentioned the 85, but you and I have been talking about the need for wider and super wide. So Tell us a little bit about the other widths that you've been using, the other lenses you've been using.
So lately, I've actually been using primarily these two lenses. So this one is my Loxia. This is the 35 f2. And then I've also been shooting with the Loxia 21 millimeter, which is 2.8. And these are both manual lenses. And what kind of got me into that is when you're shooting autofocus as opposed to manual, your shooting is going to change because you're not going to be able to take photos at that fast pace that you can with an autofocus lens. And the reason I shoot with the manual is because I actually can take my time. I'm not rushing to do anything. And I want to really think about the shot that I'm taking, actually kind of take in my surroundings. And that's what I get from the manuals. And the reason I've gone to the wider, I sometimes use it on the A7R2, the 21 and 35, but lately I've been using them on the A6000 and the A6400 as I brought my 6000 kind of back out of retirement. I hadn't shot with that camera in, who knows how long. It's been several years now. And I just happened to get kind of like encouraged and inspired to use a crop camera again. And I brought my 6000 and I said, I'm gonna put a Loxia lens on it. I just want to see how this works out. And I just fallen in love to where that's why I got the 6400. So those have been my two new favorites, the 21 and 35 for doing street.
So take me through a little bit about how you're doing this. So you're shooting a manual lens, but the way you've described things to me before, it sounds like you really like being a fly on the wall. You don't always like people focusing on the fact that you're photographing them. So what aperture are you using when you're shooting these lenses?
So with the being that I shoot prime lenses, a lot of people's first thought is, oh, those are wide open. No, all of my photos are never wide open. And especially with the manual lenses, people sometimes wonder, well, how do you get a in focus photo if people are walking? 9 out of 10 times, especially in New York, people aren't standing still. So how do I take those photos? I'm actually stopping down my aperture. So there's a photo that I actually took of a man who was walking and he was on a cane by a car. And I shot that with the 35, I believe, the 35 f2, and I shot that at an f8. So that way I saw him walking. Once he got into a point in the frame that I wanted to take the shot, I didn't really have to think about, is this photo totally in focus or is it not? When I shoot manual, I'm not thinking on the side of, is that the perfectly in focus photo? I am generally looking to capture the story at that point. And so a lot of times I take photos that may be slightly out of focus. Sometimes it actually might be entirely out of focus. It just depends on what I feel at that time and what I feel that the story is that I'm trying to tell from that specific image.
So you're giving yourself more depth of field by going to f8. So you kind of have more area that's in focus. So you don't really have to worry about so much whether your focusing is not as critical, which I think is really fascinating. Are you looking through the viewfinder or are you looking on the back of the camera?
Most times it's through using the monitor on the back of the camera. Very seldom do I use the viewfinder. The reason for that is if I hold the camera up to my eye, if anyone does recognize me, see me taking a photo, they're going to think, oh, is he taking a picture of me? But if I have it down here, people don't know what I'm doing. They don't know that I'm actually can see my screen, a live view, and I'm actually taking a photo. So you don't really look like a photographer when your camera is down. So that's how come I generally, if I'm doing street, I won't shoot it at my eye. A lot of times I do that too because I want to get that long perspective. If I'm shooting at eye level, sometimes I'm actually aiming down to my subject. So I'm actually catching more of what's going on on the road or something. I'm not catching the buildings, the tall buildings in New York. So I will shoot from, either here or even lower from the hip. And so that way I get that upward angle. So that way, people wonder, like, how do you make people look bigger than life in your photos? Or how do you actually find these individuals where it just looks like they're by themselves amongst all these big buildings? And it's just, the perspective, taking it at a low angle. For me, I really love that kind of look a lot, and just aiming up to catch the tallness of the buildings.
So you've really lowered your point of view, and now you're starting to expand your width on your lens. So that's kind
Right.
of giving you this really kind of nice sweep.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, and that we are really all enjoying. So are you using, I'm imagining that you're extending your screen out a little bit to make it easier for you to see. Do you move that at all?
Depending on the photo. So one thing that people will notice a lot is that my street photos are usually taking in the portrait or uh, vertical orientation. And I do that a lot because one, I'm also thinking in the mindset of Instagram if I'm sharing there and the vertical images just appear better. Or a lot of times it's because I want to catch the length of those buildings. So that's why I will take a photo that's generally mostly vertical for street. And if I'm doing it vertical, I can't adjust my screen, tilted out to really see it. So a lot of times I just take the photo and I just, wherever it is positioned, that's the shot that I get. How I'm able to do that is all of my cameras, I set my focus point in a specific region for whichever orientation I'm using. So with the 6400 or with the A9, for each way that I turn the camera, the focus point will go to where I have it positioned when I change that orientation. And it's the SW, I think horizontal vertical option. If you see that in your camera, that's what that is for. So you can set that to have your autofocus area as well as your focus point change when you change your orientation. So that's very critical for me because I usually photograph within the same area, regardless of which way I'm holding my camera. So when I actually aim, a lot of times I'm not looking at the screen at all. I don't know what I've caught, but because I know how I shoot, I know I got the shot. I've never had to question, did I get a photo?
So are you on, I know that you've been Sony like since the very beginning of your career. So do you find that the focus peaking makes it easier for you to focus so far away from your face?
Yes. Sony has now made my job so easy to where if I knew nothing, I could still take the perfect photo just about. And the reason I say that is because from shooting the A7R2 for instance, and then going to the Alpha 9, the focus is just a night and day difference between those cameras. The real-time IAF of the 9 and the 6400 is to where I can basically just point and shoot because the focusing is just so good. And with the lenses that I'm using, the autofocus is just dead on. I can just aim and shoot. If I frame it in the position that I normally take my photos, it's going to be in focus. Once that camera locks on the eye, that it's just a matter of taking the shot at that point.
That's really
That's
That's really kind of an interesting difference between a lot of street photographers that I've talked to, who will set the aperture pretty tight, and then they know their distance is their focus distance is 10 feet or something. So they'll walk into a situation knowing that and take it because everything's preset. What you're actually saying though is you set your focus point and let the camera set the depth of field to wherever that focus is, and lets the camera take care of it rather than having to know that actual distance.
right. When distance really becomes a factor is entirely when I'm shooting with the Loxia lenses.
Right. Yeah. Well,
And
because yeah, you give up that autofocus ability with,
right.
for the transition to that more cinematic look.
And that's usually for people that wonder how I shoot with the manual lenses. It's understanding these markings that are on the lens. These markings are there to tell you, how far your distance is and what's going to be in focus. So I actually demonstrated this to someone that I was teaching a workshop to in New York, where I said, okay, that person to me, they're about 10 feet. And I said, set your lens and put it around 10 feet. And so when they took the shot and I said, zoom into the shot, it was in focus. I said, that's what this is for. I
Right.
said, now take a picture of this person that's maybe 3 or so feet in front of us. I said, put your focus to where on the marking you see the 3 to 5 feet, put it in between there. and then take the shot. Shot was in focus. I said, that's how you use manual lens. I'm like, the markings are there to help you. Once you're above a certain amount, you're at infinity at that point. So,
Mhm.
like, it's a little bit more forgiving. But for those closer shots, use the markings. That's what they're there for. You know, I I'm a numbers person. Math and science was always my thing. And so I'm calculating different things like that. I'm like, okay, how far is this person from me? So that way I can just dial things in. I look at what my subject is doing, and then I wait for that moment to really come in and take the shot that I want. So that way it's just take the shot, I'm on to the next one. I don't linger when I'm taking any of my street photos because I don't want people to recognize me.
That's awesome. There's a question that's come up from Emmanuel
You
Hernandez.
beat me to it.
Ah, gotcha. So it says, do you use hyperfocus on your manual lenses?
Uh, with the Loxia, since these are a native lens, uh, once I start adjusting my focus, it does magnify, if that's what he's referring to.
Hmm.
It does automatically magnify. So I have that turned on. And as I'm adjusting, I can see at a closer range what I'm actually getting in focus. And so it does help a lot for when you're shooting with manual lenses, especially with a wider lens like this 21. Sometimes it can be a very tricky thing to get this lens in focus because it's so wide. You need to magnify the shot and then adjust your focus so that way you can really make sure you're getting everything in focus.
Cool.
Ken, I don't know if you're seeing this, but your fan club is checking in, and Mitchell Cook wants to tell you how proud they are of you.
Oh, thank you.
Ken has quite the fan club. It amazes me. Ken and I do these weekly Instagrams together, and his followers and the questions and the loyalty, and they just love him. And I'm imagining Mitchell must be a family member too. But um,
Yes, that is my godparents are tuned in, so I'm happy to have them there, my dad there.
there,
Oh,
but we're proud of you too. I love hearing about what you do, and I never would have looked at the distances on my manual lenses because I work so completely different. So that's really fascinating to me that you even think about that process while you're shooting. I mean, it's just so, again, we're so opposite of what we're doing. So you're holding your camera pretty low. Is that your preferred angle, I guess, is to be your point of view pretty low most of the time? Do you ever bring it up, or is it mostly pretty, you prefer that?
Depends on what the actual composition is. So, for example, there was a shot that I took that a lot of people were really surprised about, where it was a girl that was just kind of uh, crouched down on the sidewalk, and a guy actually walked through. And so the photo is me shooting through this man's legs at the girl, but that was not planned. And when I took that, I actually had the camera a little bit more closer to my face, and I actually was sometimes looking through the viewfinder or using the screen because I was actually low to her level. So in that instance, I can actually play around with my height of where my camera is. And so I actually took that with many people when they saw the photo. I didn't put any camera information, but it was taken with the A6000. Many people think that, oh, if you're shooting with the A9, you can get any shot like that and use it in burst mode. I never shoot any of my street photos in burst mode. I never do that. I've never utilized the 20 frames a second on my 9, and I've never utilized the 10 frames a second on my 6000. Every shot, it's just one shot. If I miss it, that's it. That for me, that just makes street photography more fascinating, more fun because it's all about seeing those moments and capturing them. But if you're doing burst mode, you're basically just trying to guess in a sense. And if I nail a photo like that, and I'm like, I can say, I just have that one photo. There, that's it. I either got it or I don't. And that for me is my gratification that I receive of, this just makes me feel so great. Versus if I have 50 shots, it doesn't feel as special. I can just go through, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. Okay, this one kind of works. It doesn't have the same kind of it doesn't really say the same thing to me. So that's why I've never utilized burst mode on any of my cameras. I love the 9. The reason I got the 9 was because of the focus itself, not for the frames per second.
Well, and I totally understand. I've never been I shoot so slowly that, I mean, I basically could be doing medium format. So it's I my Nikon D800, when I had that, I think that was 3 frames per second, but I rarely ever shoot more than 1 frame per second, so it's fine. So if you were leaving an apartment in New York City to go do a walkabout and see what you could see, and you could only take 1 lens with you, what would it be?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. If I'm only taking 1, it would maybe be the 40 at that point, the 40 Bodice close focus. The reason being is because I usually use at least 2 lenses. It's either going to be a 20 millimeter-ish lens or my 85. So having the 40, it kind of gives me a little bit of in between if I only have to take 1 lens. I never take more than 3 lenses when I'm doing street. And I do mix up my families of lenses. Sometimes I'm feeling, just all out manual. I'm like, I just want to take my time. I don't want to rush. Just want to kind of cruise the streets. And so I'll take my Loxies. I'll take the 21, the 35, and the 50. Sometimes I might feel, I want to have my autofocus lenses. So it'll be the 25, 40, and 85 Bodice lenses. But then I might just want to go all out crazy and have where I mix it up. Let me take the 21 Loxia, the Bodice 85, and heck, I don't know what I'll throw in the middle. Maybe I'll throw the 35 Loxia or the 40 close focus. Who knows? I never know what I'm going to do a specific day until I get myself dressed. I'm packing up my camera bag and I'm like, do I feel like I'm a 40 person today or a 35 Loxia? Like, what do I want to do?
Ken,
Really,
this is why we love you so much, because I mean, all out crazy. You really rockin' party is 3 lenses that are out of focus for a change.
right. Well, it kind of it challenge. It sounds like you try to challenge yourself too, rather than settling into a trinity of focal lengths. Really trying to really push yourself to capture the image and not worry about the equipment that you have. It sounds like you spent a lot of time woodshedding with your different focal lengths.
Yeah, so total lenses that I have, they're all ZEISS, and I have 11 lenses. So
Wow.
sometimes choosing a lens can be a pain in the butt because it's like, huh, what do I want to do? Like I have so many options, but you really have to narrow it down because you don't. I usually don't change lenses when I'm out shooting. If I ever have to, which I try to make that as rare as possible, is I may change a lens once, but it's never a back and forth type of scenario. And I'm usually primarily using 1 camera. If I do use 2 cameras, then I'll put maybe an 85 on 1 lens and maybe the manual like 21 on another lens to have that wide. On the crop, it gives me the 30 around 35 millimeters. So I do that because if I'm more so thinking about what lens am I going to use for this shot or that shot, and I'm really indecisive about what I'm going to do, I'm going to miss a ton of photos for that day. And I don't want to do that. But there have been times to where I've taken the 25 Bodice out and I see the most perfect photo, but I have the wrong lens on. So what do? I just missed the shot. I'm like,
Mm.
that was a beautiful photo, but I can't get it. I don't, you're, even if you do decide to change lenses, the shot is gone. You can't get that shot back. And then if you say, okay, well, I'm going to keep this lens on because I might see another shot that's just as great as that one. But now you see a photo, I should have had 25. You're thinking too much at one time, and I try not to do that. I take things as I'm walking down the street. If I see the perfect shot, I take it if I can. If not, oh well, it's going to be another shot. It's always that unpredictability of walking and just seeing what you're going to capture and take home for that day.
With
So one
it's
of your fan club here, Ken, young talent, first of all, they wanted to give a shout out to you. And
Yeah.
then they asked about photography tips. So I'm going to answer this for you because I think we just covered this. So, young talent, I'm just pointing this out. If you are just starting, one of the things Ken has just said is that the 40 is a great generic focal length, the Bodice 40, for you to start with before you have a fuller range of lenses. So I think that that is a great thing to pull out. And Seawood also is commenting that they truly love your work. So
Oh.
Ken, talk for a second for me about color palettes. Do you have preferred palettes when you leave the house that you like to shoot or don't like to shoot?
So that's a very good question. I love you, Tracy. You always ask me the great stuff.
We do
So
talk in advance, people.
all the time. So
Too much.
color and patterns are so essential to my work. Why is that? Because I'm looking for things that really gravitates to people's eyes. So I usually stay away from people who are wearing anything that's all black or just straight solid colors. I'm looking for things that are like checkered patterns, stripe patterns. And then in terms of color, during the winter time, I like looking for colors that are kind of more of those earth-like tones where it's tan, beige, sometimes mixed in with maybe a nice navy blue type color or something like that. And there's just a very nice pattern behind that. I stay away from all black, and the reason for that is if I take that shot, there's no defining detail in that specific photo to really give people's eyes that sense of kind of like a 3D effect. Where all of my images that I take, I always try to have three elements in all of my shots. And people wonder, like, it looks like a painting. It just looks so true to life. It's because of how I take my shots. So I always usually have something in the foreground. You have my subject, and then there's background. And sometimes what's in the foreground has nothing to do with the photo at all. It's like I just put it there and frame it that way because I like that it's kind of like a line where it's just leading you across the whole image. And so looking for those types of colors, during the spring or summertime, I'm looking for more vibrant colors like neon colors, fluorescent colors, things that kind of fit the season. Or if it's fall time, I'm looking for those reddish, those orange colors because I want to really bring those things out for that particular season. So that's kind of where I look for capturing different things of different colors and patterns to where you'll see images of people having these really nice scarves or they have on really nice hats or something, or their just whole ensemble just looks really great. That's what I see. When I photograph street, I'm looking at those things and that's what grabs my attention. It might be something that might be a mural or something. And I'm like, oh, I like this mural. I wonder if I can capture someone walking across it, just one individual walking across a shot because of all those different colors and patterns. So that's how I just look at things. For example, the train station downtown, the Oculus, it's just a big, massive white building. And I love when I can put people in front of that to where it's like they have on all these different colors, but then you see this massive white, just white building, white backdrop that's behind them. That just really pops very well. So that's kind of how I go about that. Like this particular photo, this black and white, I stayed on this mother and daughter for a long time. I had some color shots, and then I also had some that I did in black and white. And I love having just those gigantic buildings in my photo. And you just sometimes have people that are in there and it's like they're just very microscopic in the shot. But then you see this majestic building. And the reason I sometimes flip between black and white and colors because the scene looks great both ways. Many people wonder how do your black and whites just look like they're so perfect. Everything that I shoot is not black and white worthy because it has to have the right balance of highlights and shadows for it to work. And sometimes that's what a lot of people don't really analyze a lot about their photos. They'll just throw anything black and white and wonder like, oh, this doesn't really look the same way, or it may not look like how your photos look. Because I'm very selective about what goes to black and white. It has to be a specific level of shadows and highlights in the shot to where you have so many defining edges and defining with the highlights and the contrast in the photo to where I can look at a specific frame that I take and I'm like, that's going to be a black and white. Or I might say, oh, I have to keep two files, black and white and color. That just works so perfectly. Same with the patterns, Tracy. I'll see someone with a nice scarf and I'm like, oh, that look great in black and white just because of those different highlights and shadows in their scarf or those patterns.
Let's switch a little bit to compositional notes. For example, I noticed some of your images, the buildings are really like half and half, where you've got some element dividing the image in half. And then I'm looking at some and you're more into the thirds or a third up. So tell me, what is your preferred compositional strategy when you're shooting these, or does it change with every photo? What is your thought process there?
So my primary composition is always that lower right third. That's usually my go-to composition. The reason for that is because I like positioning people on that lower third, and then you just have all of this stuff behind them, whether it's a building or bridge, whatever it may be, because it's just, really shows what that person is a part of in that specific scene for that particular image. And, whether it's a street sign or whether it's, it just might be tables and things behind them. But it just shows you what the full scene is about. There are some to where, like you said, it may not be that way. A person might be more centered or dead on. And for that type of instance, it's because of what may be in the background. There's not much advantage of positioning someone in that lower third. And so I can actually fill in the frame a little bit more. Maybe have a little bit of a building or architecture, such as the shot, black and white shot with the two kids and the mother on her phone.
Right. Yeah, we
You
just saw
know,
that one. Yeah.
I saw that shot as I was waiting for the 7 train, and I said, "Oh, this is a great shot," and I just happened to capture that moment as the two kids were looking up, and one was pointing to the sky, and you see it's a lot more cropped in, and because the station really doesn't have anything that's around, so it's like I can come in a little bit tighter. And for that specific photo, you see they are still positioned on the right of the third, but I fill in the sort of vertical of that third. And I usually, whatever my subject is facing, that's how I position them. So if someone is kind of facing going to the left, then I'm going to position them in the right to capture them looking to the left. It's I would say it's very seldom I ever kind of switch that around. But so I always like to generally go in the direction that someone is looking. So put them to the side and have them with more space to what angle that they're looking towards.
So, quick question from the chat box. Hey, Brandon, we always love seeing you pop up in our chat box. I love. We have some regular people who always pop in, and Brandon, I understand, is an excellent photographer. So, after we get done, I'm actually going to go follow your work and see some more of what you're doing. Thomas Robbins asked if you're using a filter on the camera to avoid reflections.
Ooh, good question. I get that a lot. So for my street work, I never use filters. So there's a photo that you'll see of a girl in Starbucks, I believe, and she was on her laptop and she had her drink, and you see the reflection of like the cars that are across the street. But it looks so clear to where it's almost like if you didn't see the cars in the shot, it looks like it was like no window there. Certain shots, that's one good example. Then there's one of a guy that was in a coffee shop. He was actually looking at me. He saw what we friend and I were doing, and he was looking at the frame. And I have to position myself in a way to where the reflection is not on the subject. So I can't shoot most images dead on because I'm going to either have my own reflection in the photo, or I'm actually going to capture a lot of the reflection that's coming off a window. So a lot of times I'm actually at an angle, and I don't use any kind of filters to capture that. It's just a matter of how I position myself to take that subject through glass.
So another great question we have from Chris Ditchert is, has anyone ever recognized themselves from one of your photos?
Oh my gosh. So when I did Jason's interview, that had never happened at that moment. After that, though, I took a photo that was in Grand Central, and it was in his video. Because it got around to so many people and many people followed me on Instagram, I shared that photo on my Instagram, and someone knew the couple in the photo and tagged them. I was like, that's the first time that's ever happened. I was like, what are the odds of that? As big as the city is and how many people there are, that someone knew that couple. And so they tagged them in it. And they're like, is this you? And the person wrote back and said, oh my gosh, yes, that's me. So they were happy about the photo. And a lot of times people wonder, are people ever mad or anything like that? They were so happy that I actually caught the photo of them. And so what I do for anyone that ever recognizes themselves in any of my street photos, I send them the original digital file, and then I also print that file to send to them. And so once they got it, they actually showed me their print, printed out and hung up. I was like, oh, that's so nice, because people wouldn't think that it was a great photo where this couple was, they were just hugging one another, standing in the middle of Grand Central as all these people are rushing by. And I just took a shot of them because, going back to Tracy asking about colors and patterns, their colors and what they were wearing just stood out to me amongst all these people, to where I just focused in on them and took a few frames. And I don't ever expect people to see themselves in my photos, but that one instance, that did happen.
So we have a great question here from Emmanuel Hernandez. He says, I know you photograph a lot in New York City. Are there any other cities outside of the US that you would be interested in photographing?
Oh, outside of the US. Um, I would love to go to London and Paris, love to go to Dubai, uh, Thailand, and Tokyo as well. I hate Jason Bong because he actually got to go to Tokyo and do some street work.
We
I'm like,
don't hate him. We just hate that he beat us to it. So
yeah, I'm like, Jason, if you're watching this, I'm still upset at you for going to Japan and I didn't get to go. But I would love to do street in other cities because like a place like Tokyo, it's like a even busier New York. And it's like, for me, I just can't process that. But I feel like I would have a ball there with all the abundance of people and different culture, and there's a lot of different things to see and learn. So I have, those are probably like my top few that I have that I would definitely love to go to and do some street.
So there's a question from Brandon Cunningham here, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because we have actually talked about developing post-processing into a separate episode. But Brandon is asking, are you only capturing in color and then doing the black and white in post, or are you capturing it in black and white from the original?
So all of my images are shot raw in their normal color, and I will do my black and whites in post. The reason for that is because I'm actually a very picky person when it comes to my black and whites, and it has to be a specific look. I can't really describe it, but when people see it, they'll see kind of like how detailed and kind of like how my blacks are and in my black and white images, to where everything has to be perfect. I'm more picky with black and white than I am with color, for sure.
I see Matthew's sister here who goes by Mr. Castle, who's a New York City photographer and does a lot of street work. So, hey, Matthew, I made him come because I was like, you have to come watch Ken on street stuff because he's so fantastic. Ken, Brandon is asking you to go to Morocco with him. So, Brandon, hello, I'm here too. I mean, really, that's not fair.
There's an awesome series that Brandon did in Morocco that was all black and whites. It's on the Lensbuyer site, but certainly it's a great piece. We appreciate Brandon providing that to us. But yeah, no, Brandon's an awesome black and white shooter as well.
Okay, I have to check out your work, Brandon.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna do this as soon as we finish. Ken, so we talked about having one lens. If you could only go out with one, you would take the 40. But obviously, if you could go out with multiple lenses, you said there would be two. You probably wouldn't take the 40. So if you were only able to take two, what would you take?
For the bodice, I would take the 25 and the 85. And for the Loxia, I generally take my 21 and 35. Sometimes it could switch to the 21 and 50. So the reason for that is because I do like to have a wider range lens for those situations where, an 85 might be a little bit too tight for certain things. And it actually is, and people will probably notice this, I'm picking lenses that are outside of the typical street range, because now I'm going to a 25 or 21, which is wider than that usual 35, and then I'm shooting 85 instead of that usual 50. The reason being is because I like to be different from everybody else. I'm a different person anyway, so I just like to be different in my approach. And people's mindset is that, well, those are super wide lenses. You have to really get pretty close to people. I'm like, if you want to, yeah. I actually demonstrated this at Grand Central. I said, one great thing about being a street photographer today is the evolution of cell phones. Why is that? Because people will hold up their phone like this and they won't know that you're there. I demonstrated this for someone. I said, you see that guy over at the booth for the tickets at Grand Central? I'm like, watch this. I walk over, I had the 25 on my full frame, so I'm actually at 25. I stood next to a guy for 3 minutes and he never saw me. I'm like, no one is paying attention. If you see someone on your cell phone, on their cell phone, you pretty much have a very high chance of getting that shot and they won't notice. Trust me. I actually took a shot on the platform for the Metro North trains once. There are about 7 people in the shot in going through this window. It was just myself and my friend on the platform. So we are very obvious, looking dead into the train window. We stood there for the longest time. Not one person looked up away from their phone. And we're just right there knocking off pictures. They had no idea. And so it's a lot easier than what people think. But one thing that I always tell anyone is that you need to really be cognizant about what you capture. What do I mean by that? If there's a subject that I see that might be a great subject to capture, I look at the risk level. So I'm like, do they look like someone that would say something or be disappointed that I'm taking a photo of them, or can I get that shot without being caught? All of those things are going through my mind, and I have to process it very quickly, because if I take too much time to think about it, the shot is gone. So I'm thinking about, can I take this without risking getting caught or anything like that? So if I see that the risk is a little bit too high, I'm like, oh, I won't chance that. Every now and then I just might be in that mood to where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go for it. Like, I'm in a great mood today. I feel like, yes, if I see the shot, I'm gonna go for it. To where sometimes I'll shoot with my wide lens and I'll get real close. But then there are the days to where I feel very kind of shy and I don't feel comfortable being up close to people. So that's typically like my 50 or my 85 days. So it just depends on, how I feel, what the weather is. If it's raining, oh, you can best believe I'm going to go all out. I don't care what it takes to take the photo. I'm going to take that photo. Because when it's inclement weather, who's going to chase you when it's raining?
So my friend Larry Petroff, hey, Larry has checked in and he has a question that is very close to the question I was going to ask you. So he's asking, have you ever gone up and asked people in the street for a photo? But my question is, after you've taken the photo, or if you see someone you're interested in, has there been any scenario where you have wanted to go talk to them? So we're basically thinking the same thing, but is there a situation where I know you like being a fly on the wall, but is there a situation that makes you want to go talk to somebody?
Yes. So I actually have three very memorable ones. So the first one though, and I actually have to go through my book and try to find that and hold it up and show you. But there was one, and many people remember her from last year, where I saw this girl, loved her outfit. That's what stood out. All the patterns, all the colors that stood out to me. And I was like, oh, I gotta get a picture of her at this food cart. Like I just loved her whole look. She was beautiful. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. We're in the money now. So then I thought about it. I was like, I would love to go up to her, but I was unsure because again, I'm a shy photographer. So I was like, I'm not sure if I want to do it. So my thought process was if I see her again, I would do it. So it's kind of like, okay, second time, okay, first time, I don't see him, okay, whatever. So the girl, I saw her cross the street and then she sat down in Madison Square Park. And I was like, oh, I got to do it now because she's sitting right there. I'm like, I could basically do it. So since I was teaching a workshop and there were like 50 photographers around me, I was like, I could make this a part of the workshop. So I said, I'm going to go over and show her the picture. And, this will be a kind of a test to you all. You know, she might like it or she might tell me to get rid of it. So I walked over to her, introduced myself and told her what I was doing. And she said that she did see us and was curious as to what in the world were we doing. And so I told her, I said, "Oh, I'm over here doing a workshop across the street, and we were doing some street photos." And I showed her the back of my camera and said, "I took these photos of you." She was like, "Oh my gosh, I really like these pictures." And it's just so ironic that you showed me your pictures because I've been looking for a photographer for about a week because I wanted to do some photo shoots. And I was like, "Oh, you don't say. Well, let me give you my Instagram and my card then." So it just ended up to where we did a couple photo shoots together as well. So I've had that type of scenario to where a random stranger becomes, friends or clients of mine afterwards. And there was one where the guy who was behind the counter in a train station, very colorful, had the orange hair. Um, I saw that guy and I was like, I would love to show him that picture. And a lot of people were like, oh, did you ever show him this? And I was like, no, I didn't, but I wanted to. Someone in my community, I swear, people in my community know everybody. Someone knew the guy and was like, oh yeah, he works at this train station because I couldn't remember what station I was at. I was like, where was I? And people were like, oh yeah, this is where he is. And so I said, I would love to show him. So if I go back, I want to show him that picture because so many people love this photo. And it was one of my favorites as well. And I it's been some very interesting scenarios that have happened with people that I've had on the street and some that I've gone up to. But I think she was the only one that I've actually gone up to. Outside of that, no one else. I did have another scenario though where I was on
We
a
are going to
flight.
break you out of your shyness.
I don't know about that, but good luck
Yeah.
trying.
Yeah, no. Ken and I keep talking about this. He's got so much personality on social media. I'm better in person. Somehow we're gonna help each other kind of break out of this. So, Rick Mentore. Oh, is this the other one you wanted to tell us about?
So that's the girl that I met while I was doing my workshop.
That
So
it is a cool photograph too. Now, is she the one that became your muse after that? Or
yes.
was that okay? Yeah, Ken and I were talking about this, how he started having this relationship with her where she would kind of give him like a muse type of relationship for his photography, which is it's really cool. I have 3 or 4 muses that I work with. It's always, I think it's important for every photographer to have one of those people in our lives. Rick Mentore, I just don't want to forget his question, is asking, can you make a living from just street photography?
Um, I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that because I don't do street photography to make money. It's just something fun that I like to do. I like to teach about it, and it's kind of my getaway from the actual work that I do. I guess indirectly, I make money from it. What do I mean by that? Like I sell my presets from my street images online. But I don't sell the images themselves. I that's not my thing to really do. I know there are some photographers out there that do make a living, or I'm not sure if they make their full living from doing street, but generate money or income from doing street photography. But it's just never been something that was on my radar to do. I do it for fun. I do it for, the excitement that I get of seeing different things in a given day, and taking myself away from my, like, doing portraits, doing weddings, or doing landscape photography. By doing those other genres, it just helps when I do go back to a different genre of having new techniques and new ways that I actually compose my photos.
So Aiden Ray is asking, how did you end up with ZEISS? Was it the result of trial and error with other brands? There's that darn ZEISS cup again that you have that I don't.
I gotta show it, Tracy. I don't know why
At
you're always.
least, I would say at least once, but usually multiple times. Yeah, this is
Exactly.
a running gag between Ken and I, as he has all of the great stuff. He came in at the right time. I was pre the promotional items. So Ken, back to Aiden's question. How did you end up with ZEISS, and was it trial and error through other brands?
So the way that I got started with ZEISS is, and I actually told them Tony and some of the other leads within ZEISS the story last year, that a girl that I liked in high school had a Sony CyberShot, and it was a W120. Yes, I remember the camera brand, the model
See,
and everything.
all of us girls always hold all the power.
So she had the Sony CyberShot, and the lens was a Carl Zeiss lens. So I was like, oh, I got to go out and get that same camera then. I was like, I got to buy this. So I went out, and that was kind of like my graduation gift to myself. And so I bought that camera. So I had that in 2008. And then I thought, starting my business, okay, I need to get a bit better camera. And so at the time, I was looking at Nikon, but then Sony came out with three cameras that year in 2008: the A200, A300, A350. So I thought, well, shoot, I have a Sony CyberShot. I might as well just stick with the Sony brand. Being that I didn't know anything really about professional level photography, I thought Sony was great. But if you asked a professional in 2008 about Sony, who, why would you buy that? That would have been the reaction. But so since I didn't know that I bought the A300, and my family has always been a Sony family. So I was familiar with the brand just on that principle. But then I liked the image quality that my friend had from her camera, and I just always saw that Zeiss lens. So getting the Sony Alpha DSLR, my whole ambition was to always have, I wanted to one day have an all full lineup of Zeiss lenses. I don't know why, but it's just I had to have all Zeiss. So early in my career, of course, I couldn't afford no Zeiss. And back then, what people don't know is, if you had a Sony camera, the only available lenses, like your 16 to 35, your 24 to 70, the 85 prime, 135 prime, all of those were Zeiss lenses, because, you know, Sony G Master didn't exist at that time. Mirrorless didn't exist way back then. So Zeiss was the top of the line. And so I said, that's my aim. I want to have all Zeiss lenses. So when I was able to finally, start using and affording Zeiss lenses, that's just all that I ever knew. If they're asking how did I get partnered up with Zeiss, Tony is the man to ask for that, because I certainly don't know.
No, I don't think that was the question. I think really it was, how did you decide Zeiss was the brand for you when you were looking at lenses, and
Yeah,
it was
so it
more of a
was
comparative question.
okay. So yeah, it was just primarily just seeing my friend who had the Sony CyberShot, and I remembered the name Zeiss, Carl Zeiss on it. And as I started getting more familiar in photography and learning things, I saw, oh my gosh, this company is amazing. They're great. I never really knew that. But just from the images and things that I saw from her, I'm like, oh, this camera is really good. That's a come. I'm like, oh, she's got it. I'm buying it. I'm getting the same one. And so what I saw from other lenses, I tried other lenses and it just didn't really produce what I wanted in my photos. Contrast and color is very important to my work. People see that I have a lot of very well defined, levels in my edges and my shadows, and the Zeiss lenses just resonated that a lot better. And so it was hard to tear me away from that.
I
And
it's awfully good to hear. I've been waiting to jump in, and that's really one of those things that we always recommend, even as the brand. Certainly, the Zeiss lenses. We've had a relationship with Sony for over 20 years now, and
yeah,
we started making, like you said, lenses with them, and then we branched out, and that's how you get the Loxia line or the Batis line. Those are lenses that are specifically just under the Zeiss name, our own designs, our own lenses. But I always encourage people, shoot with what you got. I know there was a question there. Somebody's asked, how do you have some tips for a beginner? And that's always my point: is shoot what you have. There are certain levels of quality in lenses, and you'll see that as you start. You get a kit lens, and it's the best thing in the world until you start shooting with it, and then your skill level jumps up, and you're like, well, I needed something a little bit better. And there's certain levels of quality in different lenses that are out there. But it's always about your art. Ken does a fantastic job with Zeiss lenses, and what he's talking about is really something you see in what we call the Zeiss look. It's that color, it's the clarity, and it's also the pop, that micro contrast. And Ken really puts that to the test in the images that he uses. You can see almost a 3D effect inside the depth of field that he's able to create, and that's a function of a really high quality lens.
yeah, and for me, it's very important because I know a lot of photographers out there don't print their work. I'm kind of guilty of that too. And like the pictures behind me are just a few of the ones that I've ever printed, really. But like I actually got a book yesterday, and it's the first time I've ever had a book of my own work, which is it's very sad, I know. But what you see on a screen versus what you see in print is a night and day difference. And when I tell, like, if any of you all ever see me around in the city, you all need to tell me, pull this out for me, because just seeing the print quality, I'm like, I see why I love these lenses. I'm like that. It just of what I shoot and how I edit. That's also very important because my editing complements the lenses. And I'm a very, very detailed oriented person. A friend of mine who has used different lenses, he tries to stump me. So far, I'm still 100% perfect. He will send me 2 images of the same thing, taken with different lenses. And he always wants me to figure out which is Zeiss and which is not. I have always gotten it 100% correct. I've never made a mistake. I'm like, because my eyes, I'm looking very detailed at everything. So it's like people might say, "Oh, I really don't see a difference." Yeah, you don't, but I know I will. I'm just that's one of my crazy quirks. I always tell people I'm nuts. I'm really nuts.
Well, and you'll hear that from a lot of people. Like I said, as they progress, and their ability to perceive the detail in the imagery changes. And I've had other conversations with other photographers about this. Is when I started, I didn't see the magenta hue in the lens I was using, and after a while, I started to see that aberration, and I needed to move away from that setup because the detail that he was able to perceive just got better as his education, his experience got better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As we got Tracy down there.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping nobody could see that. My light
No,
just
no, they
popped off.
didn't. They
Oh,
didn't.
good. Thank you. Thank you. You made me worry there for Ken. So this is probably a good place for us to jump off. Brandon, yes, Ken has a cup and we don't. Um,
And that's
So
that's
you
all.
live close to Tony, so maybe you
All,
could go get one and ship one
all
to
of
me since he doesn't seem to be able to do that.
all of my
Um,
merchandise is in quarantine lockdown. So as soon as
yeah,
the
that's
governor
the
opens up the state,
right.
I can
Yeah, and
travel
Ken, you
again.
had that for how long before Tony had this excuse going? Yeah,
I think I sent it to you. So as I
the cup?
recall, yeah,
No, no, you didn't.
not that
No,
one.
I promise.
Oh,
No, 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 I've never had a cup. No, no. And Susie gave me my hats and my socks, so you can't even claim those.
These are our family issues, people. Just a
Yes,
FYI.
we love each other. This has been great. We really have enjoyed bringing these series to you that we've gotten to do during our COVID pandemic time. We're looking forward to continuing this conversation next week on Wednesday at 5 p.m. on the YouTube Live. We're all kind of getting used to this. We've been calling it the YouTubes.
the
Um,
YouTubes.
the YouTubes. We will be talking with Ken and myself about lens perspective, and we'll be bringing Greg Waterman on to talk about that. And we will also have somebody from ZEISS, Rich, will be there to also kind of fill in some gaps for us, because while we all know which lens we like to shoot with and why we choose that perspective, Rich has the depth of knowledge to actually kind of take us through why that lens works for us. So we're kind of looking forward to hearing that. And that will be next Wednesday on YouTube. That is May what? May
5th,
3rd? 5th, May 5th
May 5th at 5 o'clock Eastern.
on YouTube on the ZEISS Lenses Americas channel. And
Right where you are today.
Yep,
Actually,
that's right.
exactly. Yeah, I'm trying to, I'm working on these young folks here, getting them together on the social end.
On my phone, apparently thought we said, "Hey Siri," it decided to chime in and offer some help. But Tony, you want to take us out?
I will. And thanks to you two for being with us, Tracy and Kenneth, as always, a wealth of information. Thank you very much for being with us today. And thank you for showing up and spending an hour with us. We have lots of great material to talk about in the coming weeks. Wednesdays and Fridays, we're here. And you can also follow along at any of our Instagram channels. For me, it's the ZEISS Lenses, Camera Lenses Americas channel. For Ken, you look up Professor Kenneth Hines and you'll find him. And Tracy is Tracy Bosworth Page. She's on Instagram as well. All that information is in the description below this video, so you can find it there as well. Thanks again. Have a terrific weekend, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye now.